And let's continue with that story and now bring in agricultural economist from the National Agricultural Marketing Council, Thabile Nkunjana, joining us now via our video link. Mr. Nkunjana, thank you so much for your time. Let's start off here. What is your reaction to the latest coming out from the US?
Good evening to you and the SABC viewers. Yeah, so this is actually something that a lot of countries will be pleased about, especially if it it goes to be what the court is saying. Because remember, President Trump is not going to take this lying down. It's not going to be simple, but given that there's been so much impact about all this, not only for South Africa or the agricultural sector in South Africa, but across the world, it's somehow now kind of ruffles up some feathers, and hopefully, if it does, continue to be the free trade that we've been having, particularly in relations to AGOA, that will have some serious positive impact for South Africa, given the fact that for now, the products that are for South Africa are currently, facing these tariffs are the majority of what we are selling, even though there are a few that are being exempted from that.
And Mr. Nkunjana, let's touch on that and the AGOA problem that we have been facing with the US. So what does this mean for the agricultural sector in South Africa, particularly now that we know that citrus farming was largely affected?
Yeah, this would be a very welcome news for South Africa's point of view, because as I was trying to explain earlier on, that citrus, as you are mentioning, is one of the products, the leading products that South Africa export to the US. And given the current tariffs that are imposed, even if though the AGOA kind of put in some few some minor relief, the reality is that the majority of our products that we're selling to the US, they are still facing those tariffs. So therefore, if this ruling now is to be implemented, and of course there are some sort of issues there, because remember there's going to be refunding that that has to do with this. But the reality is that it will be welcomed for South Africa, especially by the farmers in the Western Cape that have really in the past years have really invested into this, and specifically targeting the US market. So therefore, all these developments will really bode well, with their aspirations. But unfortunately, things like this, they tend to be somehow, complicated, as President Trump himself, he did mention yesterday. But the reality is that for South Africa will really, this will bring some serious relief in all that, especially given that, the data itself, because we saw that in Q4, our exports to the US, they plummeted like significantly. So therefore, those tariffs were really beginning to, to put on some pressure, and that we are even expecting even more for 2026. So, but now this kind of changes that.
Yeah, and where does this place, Mr. Nkunjana, the AGOA trade deal, particularly now that we know that it has been renewed by the US, and now that we see these tariffs ruling from the US, where does this place the AGOA deal?
Yeah, so remember, with the AGOA deal for South Africa, the AGOA was, as much as we were still part of it, and also in an extension is only a 1 year, we were still facing a 30% tariff so for many of the other products. So if then they are removed entirely, and then we go back to the trading that we are having under the AGOA, then that AGOA will really mean, much for many of the industries and the products that we were selling to the US. And also, not only that, it will also allow, those industries to even further kind of push the diversification that we've been talking about. But the reality is, as far as the current administration is concerned in the US, it remains quite a volatile market for one to really trust. So therefore, this situation now kind of changes that, and which will give us, especially those industries that are really affected by this, some time to really look for their diversification. But per se, it is not to replace the US market. We've always said this, but the reality is that we still need the US market. But for now, this is going to give those industries some bit of a relief, and hopefully it goes well.
All right, Mr. Nkunjana, thank you so much for your time and for that insight. That is Thabile Nkunjana. He is an agricultural economist from the National Agricultural Marketing Council. They are weighing in on that breaking news coming in this afternoon from the US, and that comes from the US Supreme Court, of course, ruling against Trump's tariffs.